we are ready to start. We are going to give a presentation of our seminar, Civic Housing. First of all, we'd like to thank you for being here, and thank you to OIKONET for this initiative. I think it's very good that we have this opportunity within the OIKONET project to exchange these experiences between the different schools, and we can continue with the experience of its course into different institutions. So this is the main objective of this project, is just to exchange experiences and to do things together. So this class, this presentation is a very good, excellent opportunity to exchange and to carry out the activities of the project. So we have around a presentation of around half an hour. Here with me, it's Angel Martin. He has been also teaching this seminar. And we expect at some moment to have here also to Raúl Robert, which is the representative of Sostra Civic, the association of cooperative housing, who has been working also with us in this project. So we plan to give you an overview, a summary of the process and the objectives of this seminar, and also some conclusions that maybe we can discuss with you, and maybe they can be useful also for other projects. And we'd like to know also your opinion about those conclusions. So civic housing is it's an experience, a pedagogic experience we have been doing between the School of Architecture, La Salle, together with the cooperative of housing cooperative, Sostre Civic, both from Barcelona, in Spain. So this is the outline of our presentation. So we're going to present first the case study of this seminar, the participant institutions, the objectives, the process we have followed, and some conclusion at the end. If there is any problem with the connection, please let us know through the text in the chat window. So we'll start with the case study. This is Barcelona, the area next to the coast, the old neighborhood next to the Parc de la Ciutadella. This is the area of Born, next to the harbor, Barceloneta, here on this area. So here in this area is where this building on the right side is located. And underneath, you can see the floor plan of this building. This is a building that needs to be refurbished. It's a 5-story building. The city has allowed this cooperative to refurbish this building and to give a place to live to 5 families. And this is an ongoing process that we thought could be very interesting for our architecture students to enter in this process from the beginning. The process has started, but has to go on in the next months. So there's going to be a redesign of some of this housing in order to adapt it to the needs of the new inhabitants. So in this situation, we decided to design this workshop to put together the architecture students with the future dwellers in order to know what are their expectations, what are their needs, how do they imagine their future living environment. And we put together the students with them in order to investigate all of these specifications or conceptions, needs, visions that the future dwellers have about the place they want to inhabit. So the next slide is the participants. There were these 2 institutions, School of Architecture, 10 international students working in this first semester. And then the Sostra Civic, this is a non-profit organization which has properties of land, houses to refurbish, to let people who paid a fee to this organization to take over these places, even to participate in the renovation. And this is something that they are doing basically to engage the dwellers throughout the whole process, from designing the specifications to even participating in the actual building construction. So the objectives for this pedagogic experience, because it is first of all a pedagogic experience involving dwellers and also architecture students together with the teachers, mentors who were participating. So for the dwellers, the objectives were basically to empower the citizens, to make them able to participate in the definition of the living environment. So we try to, through this process, to make them aware of their actual living conditions, to be able to qualify and assess the way they live right now in their own words, in their own way of communication, in order to understand how they want to improve those conditions in the new dwellings. So to do that, we had to provide them with the appropriate instruments to express and to communicate their ideas to us. This was a very important part of the whole process because there are no such methods or tools to enable this communication between professionals and non-professionals. There are experiences, many experiences in the past, but there's not a methodology to do that. So a big challenge for the architecture students and for us as teachers was to design these communication methods and to implement these methods together with the dwellers. So the pedagogic objectives for the architecture students mainly were to learn from the dwellers rather than applying building regulations or applying building typologies as a start point of the design process of a dwelling. So we wanted them to contact first the people in order to understand their needs, their visions in their own language, and then this input to process these ideas in order to go back to them with proposals. It's a cyclic dialogue, which we covered part of the process, but we did not complete it. We could go on beyond this experience. So for architecture students, what we wanted them to do was to design the communication process, not just to design the building, but to design the communication process that is previous to the actual design task. So for that, they had to design the tools, the processes to communicate with the dwellers. That was the task for the students. Then we asked them finally to apply the result of the interaction, to process, to understand what they got from dwellers in order to use it as an input in the following design process. So here is summarized. The main purpose of this experience was purely pedagogic. It was a matter of putting together in a new learning space students and dwellers to interact and to together come up with some knowledge about housing, which would not come up without this interaction. How we did that? Here's the process. And basically, we did in two implementations. We did two workshops, 2 meetings with the dwellers along the 3 months of activities. As a starting point, we gave to our students the task to tell us why participation would be important in architecture. It was a reflection we asked them to do by themselves with some documents, some references we gave. Then, based on that, a second input was to explain to them precedences of methods and tools that were used in previous participation processes in the past. This was also done through a video lecture where we had the participation of Omaira from Puerto Rico, professor from Puerto Rico. Then, based on this first introduction to the participation process and tools, we asked the students to design a first example of communication and communication tools and to use by the dwellers in a first workshop. This was done in the first workshop implementation, and then we went back and make a review of the results obtained, and we redesigned the participatory process based on that, on the review of those of that experience. Then we created a new communication tool, new tools. We implemented it again in the workshop 2. And finally, that was the end of this process. We summarized the inputs into some proposals for housing interventions in the building that we presented at the beginning. So now we are going to see the outcomes and the process in more detail, and I will just give the word to Angel Martin. He's a teacher in this school. Also, he participated in this seminar together with me, and he will explain all the process and the results.
Well, yes, good afternoon. Yeah, we'll show basically this sequence that is here described, but illustrating it with the tasks that we follow that you can check directly on the workspace Civic Housing. So this is the sequence, but we translate this sequence and different tasks around the actions for these two workshops, these two participatory sessions. So the first thing we did, as Leandro was saying, was to reflect on the pertinence of citizen participation in architecture, in domestic architecture. We thought from a broad point of view, what are the important issues in domestic architecture nowadays, and how participation can help to solve them, no? Just as the starting point. The task was called Why Participation, and immediately the students answer that question in terms of, well, as in this one, reinforcing the sense of belonging, or creating a sense of community, or even helping to well, to be more adequate to the real situation of housing around the world. No? Like this idea of architecture without architects as an answer to problems nowadays in relation with access to housing. This was then the first approach to participation, and then immediately we the next step was, well, how we do that, what had been done before participation in history of architecture. To do that, to help us to understand theories in architecture history in relation with participation, we had this virtual lecture from Omaira Rivera in Puerto Rico. Actually did his thesis on the issue of participatory processes. So she helped us to understand Kema's elements of transition, or the Smithson's science of occupancy, or Alexander's pattern language, or the Carlos participatory processes. And with that, again, thought, well, how those experiences could help us now with this case study that we were working on in Barcelona. For instance, this PDF, again of one of the students, thought that the idea of the patterns of Alexander could also be used nowadays. It would be just the thing of how can we now develop or integrate contemporary patterns, but the idea of the pattern as something that we could see and acquire from the existing architectural relations in the city can be used nowadays. And with that, after we analyze the previous experiences, then the next step will be, well, what do we do now? No? What will be really the specific actions and activities we will ask the people of the inhabitants of this, future inhabitants of this building, what will we ask them? And what kind of activities they would have to do to give us relevant information about their ideal house and, well, just information that will help us to have design decisions. No? And the first thing we realize is that this really will have to be treated as a continuum. It's not something that is happening at a specific point in time. Really, the experience with the domestic space is something that we all have, and these inhabitants will have already. So really, the first step will be to ask them, as we see here in this step 1, to ask about their previous experiences, to then, with that information, jump maybe into a more realistic approach at the image of their ideal house or the future house, but as I said, based on previous experiences. And then might be a third step would be more could have a more formal approach as a third step, trying to work with maybe conceptual maps. But as we were saying, this is a process that we design looking at previous experiences, but really trying to use, let's say, comments in to really design. No? And we really work and talk a lot in this process. This is, for example, one of the first ideas of the students designing this process, and really one thing that we had to do is to stop ourselves as architects to work directly on forms, on position of the walls, and really designing the layout of the flats directly. No, it's something that really is well, it's a vocational action, let's say, or to design the space, but really we thought that it would be a good idea to postpone this action as later as possible, and so really to get the like the latent needs more than the explicit demands. No, instead of making the inhabitants play with walls and getting to design their future space, will be more to make them talk in a more open way about their ideas and their feelings about housing. So with that work done, with these reflections on the methodologies, we created, the students created these two first actions that we implemented in the first workshop. The first one was, as I was commenting before, to describe the previous experience on domestic space that we think is very valuable. So what we asked them directly, what they consider, what they like more and what they like the less on their current living environment. As I said, to get advantage of the experience of the space that we all have. And then, as a second step, in a quite indirect way, just making them, to the inhabitants, making them play with images and creating a collage. Really, this is an activity that has, well, that has a lot to do with this process of image elicitation. So really, the idea is that through the images, we get knowledge of their idea of inhabitant. And so basically, these were these two first actions. And with that, we came back to the, let's say, the academic environment, and we thought about what we got there, and trying to interpret these basic two first activities. And so the students analyze them, trying to get, as I said, knowledge from there. And for instance, just by reading the inhabitant test and looking at their work, the first thing we realized that there were some recurrent themes that were important for these people. So we had, at this step, we had some issues that we knew that were important for them, and so it will be also important for us to think about them as architects, and then getting, well, try to give an answer from the architecture point of view. So these issues were identity, relation with nature, comfort, the importance of community. But as I said, those are themes that it's not that we decided to think about them, but they asked us to give them an answer to them. So that's what we did. Students thought about the relation with the surroundings, or the idea of comfort, or the idea of identity, and then we look for what is the architectural response to those issues. And well, this is comfort, for instance, that is for dwellers, is not just about temperature, or yeah, if the house is warm or not. It has more to do with psychological needs or feelings. No, so really the issue of language between this inhabitant and the architect is an issue. So really, with the same word, we don't say, we don't mean the same thing. And well, and just following the steps we did, this is already an image of the second workshops with the previous experiences. We created two new more activities that really were more focused on well, trying to define or getting closer to really understand a possible program or relation of different activities inside the new house. So basically, it's two ways of creating conceptual maps in relation with the activities that could be done in this domestic space. But as I said at the beginning, trying to refrain our instincts of designing, but just working with actions or perceptions. And well, and this is the output. Maybe you can take this.
Okay, thank you. So this is the end of the process, of this process, because this could go on into the actual design, but we did not step into the design process, the design of the apartments, but we just stopped here in the suggestions that the students got from this interaction with the people. And we prepared this template for students to put here the results of their interaction. I think the structure of this template requires some time to explain it, because it could be an important output of this process. So here on the top, we have the user's input. And this is what the direct words taken from the dwellers, from the conversations, in their own language, their own preoccupations. They are summarized here. And then here on the right side, the other arrow is the answer of the students to those concerns. And in between, vertically, if we go here vertically now on the different layers, from the input provided by the users, the students summarize the problem, the underlying problem, which is this description. To this underlying problem, these are the words of students, translating in a way what they got from the users, from the dwellers. Along with this description, what the students did was to identify other related themes. For example, here the theme on the top is community. And to community, there are other issues related. For example, sense of belonging, social organization, creative learning environment, privacy. So in a way, what we have here is a formulation of a housing issue or housing problem, if you want to use this expression, which is formulated both by the users on the green area and by the students. So what is the answer to that problem in architectural terms? This here, the important bridge to be made. It's not easy to do that, of course. How we translate these requirements into a particular solution here in this particular building. So how we achieve a sense of community here in these very strict dimensions, these very strict and small floor plans we have in this case. We ask students to do these proposals in written form and also graphically, but graphically in a language that would be understandable for the dwellers. And this is an example of the theme community in this template, but we have up to 8 of these templates, each one dedicated to one theme. For example, here is open kitchen as a theme. And related themes are family, comfort, multifunctional space, sociability, and graphically just to suggest how life in that space could be and could promote and foster communication and sociability among people. This is another example, in this case, greenhousing, very popular theme nowadays, how to transform the roof into a social space. And here are some proposals to it with some these plants here on the roof with their own pots, and how they would be a space for communication, for exchange between the inhabitants of the building. There's still another one about productive space, how space is not only for living, domestic space, but also a space for producing things, for getting profit from that space. Another kind of idea of combining purely domestic activities with other kind of working activities. And finally, the conclusion, and that's the final slide, is unique. So for this reason, it's very difficult to implement methodologies that already exist. We can learn from previous experiences, but every time we face a participatory design process, it's like starting over again. And this is like indeed any design process. So this is not a surprise for architects. So the result of this pedagogic experience has been that we have created a learning space that is going beyond the limits of the classroom. And this is very, I think, important, particularly in architectural education, that we expand the limits of the design studio, the limits of our classrooms, to get in contact with the people, with the city, with the actual real environments, and to know also what the people who are going to use and inhabit the spaces think about, and take that into consideration. So we had to design and to come up with a shared language, both verbal and graphical, in order to facilitate this communication. We cannot address dwellers with the language of architects. We have to find a common space to communicate, a common language. That doesn't mean that we have to adapt to the language of professionals in work as they expect. We are professionals and we behave as professional architects, but we have to develop the capacity to translate from our language to the layman language and vice versa. So what the students did in this experience was to design the communication process. It was necessary to interact with dwellers, a process that is previous to the design of the house. And we believe that these skills that students got in this seminar, they probably are very much needed in the professional activity later on. So basically that was our presentation. There's still time for interaction, questions, if the technology allows it. So the floor is open to your questions. Thank you for your attention. You are still there.